A billionaire CEO walks into her own luxury car dealership and gets turned away. But not because she can't afford it, because of the color of her skin. What happens next? She fights back and shakes an entire industry to its core. Betrayal, revenge, and a battle for justice. This is the story of Naomi Caldwell, and how one moment of discrimination turned into a war that would change everything. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Naomi Caldwell sat in her office, the vast skyline of New York stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city never slept, but for Naomi, it had always been more than just a symbol of opportunity. It was a battlefield. As the CEO of Caldwell Motors, a luxury car brand she had built from the ground up, Naomi had broken barriers. A black woman in a space dominated by legacy names and old money traditions, she had earned her place, not through inheritance, but through grit, intelligence, and an unwavering belief that everyone, regardless of their background, deserved a seat at the table. Yet the reality of the world was never that simple. A letter lay open on her mahogany desk, the words burning into her mind. Dear Caldwell Motors, I visited your Beverly Hills showroom last week, excited to purchase one of your vehicles. As a longtime admirer of your brand, I was prepared to invest in a car that represents the pinnacle of craftsmanship and performance. However, my experience was far from what I expected. Despite my financial readiness, I was treated with indifference, even suspicion. The salespeople barely acknowledged me, and when they finally did, I was subtly steered away from the higher-end models. Meanwhile, a white customer, dressed no differently than I was offered test drives and a full presentation of options. It pains me to write this because I believed Caldwell Motors was different. I believed it stood for something greater. If this is how you allow customers to be treated, then perhaps I was wrong. Sincerely, David Williams. Her company had been built on the foundation of equality, prestige, and accessibility to all who could afford luxury, regardless of race or background. She had personally instilled that vision into every facet of the brand. Yet if the behavior described in this letter was accurate, it meant that somewhere along the chain, that principle was being ignored. She reached for her phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Naomi, what's going on? Daniel Harper, her trusted assistant. He had been with her long enough to read between the lines. I need you to book me a flight to Los Angeles, she said, leaning back in her chair. First thing tomorrow morning. There was a pause on the other end. Are we talking business or personal? She interrupted. And I need this to stay quiet. No official announcements, no corporate bookings, just a simple personal trip. Another pause. Understood. Where exactly are you headed? Beverly Hills, she said. I need to see something for myself. Daniel didn't ask further. That was one of the reasons she trusted him. After ending the call, Naomi closed the letter and set it aside. There was no turning back now. Her eyes wandered to the framed photograph on the shelf, a younger version of herself standing in front of her very first factory. She remembered what it had taken to get here. The battles, the victories, the silent, endless war of proving herself in an industry that had never made room for people like her. And now she had to prove herself again, not as a CEO, but as a customer. As she boarded the plane the next morning, she settled into her seat and gazed out of the window. The city blurred below as the aircraft ascended into the sky. Naomi stepped out of the black SUV she had rented at LAX, adjusting the strap of her leather crossbody bag as she took in her surroundings. Beverly Hills was a place of curated perfection. Towering palm trees, sleek storefronts, and streets lined with luxury vehicles that looked as if they had never been touched by a single speck of dust. Dressed in a crisp white button-down, dark jeans, and a pair of clean sneakers, she blended into the city's casual affluence. She had deliberately chosen an outfit that exuded neither wealth nor struggle, something neutral, unassuming. No designer handbag, no jewelry that would signal status. Today she was not Naomi Caldwell, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar automotive empire. She was simply a potential customer, a woman walking into a luxury car dealership to see what kind of service she would receive. As she approached the Caldwell Motors showroom, Its sleek glass exterior reflected the golden California sun. Inside, cars worth more than most homes were displayed like pieces of fine art, flawless, gleaming, untouchable. Naomi pulled open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The cool, climate-controlled air hit her immediately, carrying the subtle scent of polished leather and fresh espresso. A handful of employees were stationed around the showroom, all dressed in impeccably tailored suits. Their conversations with customers were polished, filled with the kind of effortless charm that catered to the ultra-wealthy. She glanced around, not a single face that looked like hers. She took a slow breath, then made her way toward the reception desk, where a well-dressed woman with a practiced smile greeted her. "Welcome to Caldwell Motors. How can I assist you today?" Naomi returned the smile. "I'd like to take a look at the Bugatti Chiron Supersport." The receptionist hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but Naomi noticed. A brief glance at her outfit, a flicker of doubt before she quickly recovered. "Of course, let me check with our sales team." She stepped away, leaving Naomi waiting. From the corner of her eye, Naomi caught a tall man in a navy suit approaching. A strong, confident stride, a sharp jawline, salt and pepper hair neatly combed back. Even before he spoke, she knew who he was. Richard Langford. She had read his file before. Showroom manager for Beverly Hills. A man with an impeccable track record of high-end sales, but someone whose business strategies had raised questions in the past. If anyone was responsible for fostering an environment of exclusivity, it was him. "Ma'am," Richard greeted her smoothly, though his expression was more analytical than welcoming. "I understand you're interested in the Bugatti Chiron Supersport?" Naomi nodded. "That's right." He gave her a long, deliberate once-over, not the kind of look that assessed a customer's needs, but one that sized up whether she belonged here at all. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked. Naomi raised a brow. "I wasn't aware that was necessary." Richard smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "For certain models, we typically schedule private viewings. These cars are highly exclusive." Naomi kept her expression neutral. "I understand, but I'd still like to see it." Richard hesitated again, then gestured toward one of his younger employees, a junior salesperson who couldn't have been more than 25. He leaned in slightly, whispering something to him. The young man nodded, then turned toward Naomi with an uncomfortable expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the young salesman said, "but at the moment we don't have that model available for viewing." Naomi glanced past them. Just behind the glass partition, the Bugatti Chiron Supersport was parked under showroom lights, flawless and untouched. "That's interesting," Naomi said, tilting her head slightly, "because it looks like it's right there." Richard's smile barely faltered. "It's currently reserved for a client." Naomi held his gaze. "Then I assume that policy applies to all walk-ins?" "Of course," Richard said smoothly. Before Naomi could respond, the glass doors opened, and a well-dressed couple entered. An older white man in a tailored suit, his wife draped in diamonds. Within seconds, they were greeted warmly. "Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, welcome." A different salesperson practically rushed to assist them. Naomi watched as the couple was immediately offered champagne, guided effortlessly toward the very same Bugatti she had inquired about. She turned her attention back to Richard. "That seems like a contradiction." Richard's expression barely shifted. "They're longtime clients," he said. "We already have their financials on file. I'm sure you understand? It saves time." Naomi said nothing, letting the weight of his words settle between them. He didn't just assume she wasn't a serious buyer. He assumed she wasn't worth the time. She could have corrected him in an instant, could have wiped that smug expression off his face by casually dropping her full name, her title, her ownership of the company he was working for. But that wasn't why she was here. She wasn't here to demand respect based on her status. She was here to see what happened when she had none. Without another word, Naomi stepped aside, moving toward one of the lounge chairs along the showroom's perimeter. She didn't storm out. She didn't demand attention. She simply sat, and she watched. She watched as customer after customer was treated with varying levels of enthusiasm, some with warmth, others with polite dismissal, and a pattern began to emerge. White customers, even those who appeared casually dressed, were given immediate and full attention. They were offered brochures, beverages, test drive appointments. Customers of color, They were either ignored or subtly redirected. At one point, another black man entered the showroom. He was dressed sharply, exuding confidence. Yet within moments, he was politely but firmly steered toward the lower-end models, suggestions given under the guise of finding the perfect fit. Naomi didn't need a research team or internal reports. She was witnessing the evidence unfold right in front of her. A system, a policy, a gatekeeping practice that was not accidental, but intentional. She checked her watch. She had been sitting for nearly an hour now, and not once had anyone returned to offer her assistance. She exhaled slowly, then stood up. She had seen enough. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the showroom, stepping back into the bright California sun. She could feel the weight of what she had just uncovered pressing against her chest. But there was no anger, only clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a single bad employee. This was a system, and systems could be dismantled. Naomi sat at a corner table in a small cafe across the street from the showroom, stirring a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. Through the large glass windows, she had a clear view of the dealership's entrance. She hadn't left in frustration. She hadn't stormed out or caused a scene. That wasn't how she operated. Instead, she had chosen to watch. The showroom bustled with movement, salespeople gliding across the glossy floors with effortless charm. Customers came and went, their interactions forming a pattern Naomi could now recognize. It was subtle, but only if you weren't paying attention. She saw how the staff instinctively gravitated towards certain individuals, those who fit their unspoken criteria of an ideal customer. Men in tailored suits, women adorned with designer bags, couples who carried themselves with an air of entitlement. A well-dressed older gentleman strolled in, his navy blazer crisp, his leather shoes polished. Within seconds, a salesman greeted him warmly, leading him toward one of the high-end models. The interaction was seamless, fluid, as if rehearsed. Then a young black man entered, his attire just as sharp, tailored slacks, button-up shirt, a confident gait. No one approached him. He lingered near one of the display cars, scanning the interior through the driver's side window. A few moments passed before a salesperson finally walked over, but instead of engaging him with enthusiasm, they offered a polite yet detached demeanor, their arms crossed over their chest. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Even from across the street, she could read the exchange. The salesman wasn't encouraging a sale, he was subtly discouraging one. Then came a couple. White, dressed casually, the man in a polo and the woman in a sundress. They were greeted immediately, the sales team practically competing for their attention. Champagne glasses appeared as if by magic, smiles wide and welcoming. Naomi sighed, pressing her fingers against the ceramic rim of her cup. It was a systematic selection process. Customers weren't just being judged, they were being filtered. The doors to the showroom swung open again, and Naomi's focus shifted. A young woman, no older than 25, stood near the reception desk, a tablet in hand. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, her beige blazer crisp, but Naomi could sense something in her posture. Something uncertain. Maria Torres. Naomi had noticed her earlier, the way she hesitated when Richard Langford gave orders. She had watched how Maria's gaze flickered between the customers and her co-workers, as if she were constantly questioning the very system she worked under. Then came the moment that confirmed Naomi's suspicions. A middle-aged black woman entered the showroom, her smile warm as she approached the front desk. Naomi could see her speaking with Maria, gesturing toward one of the vehicles. Maria nodded, a clear willingness to help. But before she could take even a step forward, Richard appeared. With a slight tilt of his head, he directed Maria elsewhere. The woman at the desk was left standing alone. Moments later, she turned and walked out, unassisted. Maria hesitated before obeying, but eventually she did. That hesitation was all Naomi needed to see. She placed a $20 bill under her cup, grabbed her bag, and crossed the street. Inside the showroom, the energy was much the same as earlier. Sleek, calculated, polished. Naomi didn't acknowledge Richard this time. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked straight to Maria. The young woman looked up, her fingers tightening around the tablet in her hands. "Hi," Naomi said smoothly. "I was hoping you could help me. I'd like to take a closer look at one of the vehicles." Maria hesitated and Naomi saw it again. That internal struggle, the pull between duty and conscience. Maria started, then glanced toward the other side of the room, where Richard was speaking with another salesperson. Which model were you interested in? Naomi almost smiled. Unlike the others, Maria hadn't dismissed her outright. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport, she said. Maria's breath hitched slightly, her fingers tightening around her tablet. It's right there. Naomi finished for her, nodding toward the pristine vehicle displayed under the showroom lights. Maria looked down, shifting uncomfortably. That particular model is reserved, Naomi said, her voice even. Maria exhaled, the smallest sign of frustration flickering across her face. You don't have to do this, Naomi said gently. Maria looked up sharply. Do what? Pretend there's a reason I can't see that car when we both know it's available. For a long moment, Maria didn't speak. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if weighing something. Then just as she seemed ready to say something real, Richard's voice cut through the air. Maria. Both women turned. Richard approached with measured strides, his presence commanding as he reached them. Naomi met his gaze, unbothered. Is there a problem here? Richard asked, his tone even but pointed. Maria looked between them, suddenly stiff. No, sir. Good, Richard said, then turned his attention to Naomi. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have anything available that would be a good fit for you. The audacity of his words might have made Naomi laugh if the situation weren't so deeply unsettling. Maria's jaw clenched slightly. She looked as though she wanted to say something, but Richard didn't give her the chance. He nodded toward one of the other employees, gesturing for Maria to follow. And just like that, the moment passed. Maria turned, but Naomi noticed the way her fingers gripped the tablet tighter, the way her steps weren't entirely steady. It was a small act of defiance, but small was enough. Naomi didn't push further. She knew when to step back. Instead, as she turned to leave, she reached into her bag, pulled out a business card, and set it carefully on the polished surface of the desk. Maria caught the motion out of the corner of her eye, her gaze flickering toward it. Naomi didn't say anything. She didn't need to, but she made sure Maria could read the words printed on the card before she walked away. If you ever want to talk, call me. As she exited the showroom and stepped back into the afternoon sun, Naomi knew she had done enough for now. The real work was just beginning. Maria sat in the driver's seat of her compact sedan, parked in the dimly lit lot behind the showroom. The engine was off, but she hadn't stepped out yet. Instead, she stared down at the business card resting in her palm, the edges slightly bent from where she had been gripping it too tightly. The name printed on it was simple enough. Naomi Caldwell. No title, no elaborate logo. Just a phone number. But Maria knew exactly who she was. She exhaled sharply, tossing the card onto the passenger seat and rubbing her temples. Her shift had been long, but that wasn't what had exhausted her. It was everything else. The weight of what she had seen, what she had been complicit in, and the knowledge that if she made the wrong move, she could lose everything. If she called Naomi, there was no turning back. She glanced up at the rearview mirror, catching her own tired eyes. She had spent the last 2 years convincing herself that she was just following orders, that she had no real choice in the matter. That had worked for a while, but today, after seeing how Richard had so casually dismissed a woman who should have been treated like any other customer, Maria felt something shift inside her. Keeping quiet wasn't going to make her feel any better. Before she could change her mind, she grabbed the card, pulled out her phone, and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then a voice, calm, steady, and completely expecting this call. This is Naomi, Maria swallowed. It's me, Maria, from the showroom. A pause, then Naomi's voice softened. I'm glad you called. Maria hesitated. I don't know why I did. I think you do, Naomi said gently. Do you want to meet? Maria glanced out the windshield as if checking to see if anyone was watching her. Yeah, but somewhere private. There's a cafe on West 3rd. Quiet place. Do you know it? Maria nodded to herself. Yeah, I'll be there in 20. She ended the call before she could second-guess herself. Naomi arrived first, choosing a table in the back, where the lighting was dim and the noise from the barista's coffee machine drowned out any low conversation. She stirred a cup of tea absently, though she had no real interest in drinking it. When the door opened, she immediately spotted Maria. The young woman hesitated at the entrance, her posture stiff, her eyes scanning the room. She looked nervous, like someone walking into a situation that could change the course of her life. Naomi had seen that look before. She raised a hand slightly, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. Maria saw her and exhaled, quickly making her way over. Maria didn't sit down right away. She placed her hands on the back of the chair as if considering whether this was a mistake. "I shouldn't be here." Naomi didn't push. "But you are." Maria looked at her for a long moment, then, with a resigned sigh, sank into the chair across from her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Naomi let Maria sit with the silence, knowing she would break it first, and she did. "You don't understand how bad it is," Maria muttered, shaking her head. "It's not just that we ignore certain customers. It's built into the way we do business." Naomi remained composed, but inside she felt something settle, a confirmation of what she had suspected. "Tell me." Maria glanced around again, lowering her voice. "The showroom has unofficial rules. They never put them in writing, but they're drilled into us." Naomi's fingers traced the edge of her cup. "What kind of rules?" Maria hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "We're taught to identify qualified customers within the first minute of interaction. And by qualified, I don't just mean their financial status. It's more than that." Naomi didn't let her voice waver. "You mean race?" Maria swallowed, then nodded. "Yeah. Richard doesn't say it outright, but he doesn't have to. He calls it customer profiling. Says it's about maximizing efficiency, not wasting time on people who aren't serious buyers." Naomi's jaw tightened. "And by not serious buyers, he means people of color." Maria exhaled. "If they're not famous, yeah." She looked down at the table. "He tells us not to waste time on them. Says they're either looking around or just pretending to have the money. If we get caught spending too much time with the wrong customer, we get reprimanded, sometimes in front of everyone." Naomi absorbed her words. She had known there was bias in luxury sales. She had fought against it her whole career. But hearing it spelled out so plainly, knowing that it wasn't just a few bad employees, but an enforced practice, made her stomach turn. "Have you ever pushed back?" Naomi asked. Maria let out a bitter laugh. "What do you think? I need this job. I have bills to pay. And the one time I tried to go against it, tried to actually help someone, I got a warning. If you go against Richard too many times, you don't last long." Naomi watched her carefully. "Why are you telling me this now?" Maria hesitated. "Because I saw what happened today. And because, I don't know, I guess I'm tired of feeling like I have to be part of it." She rubbed her temple. "I hate that I didn't stand up for you." Naomi shook her head. "That's not why I'm here, Maria. I don't need an apology." Maria met her gaze. "Then what do you need?" Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "I need to know if you'd be willing to stand by what you just told me." Maria's expression shifted. Fear, uncertainty. "You mean go public?" "Not yet," Naomi said. "But if I move forward with this, I need someone inside who can confirm what's really happening." Maria looked away, conflicted. "If I do that, I lose everything." Naomi didn't pressure her. "I won't ask you to do anything you're not ready for. But if you ever decide you want to be part of the change, I'll be here." Maria was silent for a long time, staring down at her lap. Finally, she exhaled. "I don't know if I'm that brave." Naomi offered a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit the truth." Maria didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. Naomi took that as a start. As she left the cafe that night, the city buzzing around her, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about one incident, one rude manager. It was bigger than that, and she was ready to fight. Naomi sat in her hotel room, her phone resting on the table as she replayed her conversation with Maria in her mind. The weight of what she had learned wasn't surprising. It was infuriating. A part of her had hoped the discrimination at the showroom was a result of individual bias, a handful of employees acting on personal prejudice. But it wasn't that simple. This was systemic. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the city lights outside her window. She had spent years ensuring Caldwell Motors stood for something more than just luxury. It stood for access, fairness, and prestige based on merit, not skin color. Yet here she was, uncovering a practice that went against everything she had built. Richard Langford wasn't just another bad employee. He was running a system designed to exclude, to quietly filter out customers who didn't fit his image of who should own a luxury car. Naomi knew she couldn't just confront him outright. He would deny it, twist it, make it sound like a misunderstanding. No, she needed proof, and not just a testimony, hard, undeniable evidence. She reached for her phone and dialed. "Daniel," she said as soon as her assistant answered. "You found something," Daniel replied, his voice sharp with attention. "Oh, I found plenty," Naomi muttered. "And now we're going to catch them in the act." The next morning, Naomi dressed in the same simple outfit she had worn before. Jeans, a button-down, sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth or power. She carried the same small bag, giving no indication that she was anyone of importance. Walking through the glass doors of the showroom, she immediately spotted Richard across the floor, speaking with another well-dressed customer. He didn't notice her yet, and she preferred it that way. This time, she didn't approach him directly. Instead, she picked a different salesperson, a young woman standing near a display of luxury sedans. "Excuse me," Naomi said, keeping her tone polite. "I'd like to take a closer look at the Bugatti Chiron Supersport." The woman glanced at her briefly before offering a professional yet hollow smile. "Unfortunately, that particular model isn't available for viewing right now." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure? I was here yesterday, and I saw it on display." The woman's smile didn't waver. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's currently unavailable." Naomi studied her for a moment. She wasn't hesitant like Maria. She was confident in her response, almost rehearsed, as if she had said the same line many times before. Naomi nodded slowly. "That's interesting," she murmured. "Thank you." She turned and walked out without another word. It was time for phase 2. Standing outside the showroom, Naomi pulled out her phone and called Daniel. "Time to run the test," she said. "I'm already on it," Daniel replied. "I've got the perfect person for this." 20 minutes later, a man in his mid-40s stepped out of a black rental car and strolled toward the showroom. He was dressed in a navy blazer, slacks, and loafers. Casual but unmistakably expensive. His hair was neatly styled, and he carried himself with the confidence of a man used to being taken seriously. His name was Michael Reeves, and he was an old friend of Daniel's. More importantly, he was a white man with the exact same financial status as Naomi, but without the barriers that had been placed in her way. Naomi stood at a discreet distance, watching as Michael entered the showroom with ease. The moment he stepped inside, a salesperson greeted him instantly, all smiles and enthusiasm. Within minutes, he was offered coffee, seated in one of the private lounges, and presented with a portfolio of vehicle options. Then came the real test. Michael requested to see the exact same car Naomi had asked about. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport. There was no hesitation, no excuses. Instead, Richard Langford himself emerged, shaking Michael's hand warmly. "Welcome, sir. I understand you're interested in the Chiron Supersport," Richard said, his tone effortlessly pleasant. "I am," Michael replied smoothly. "I'd love to take a look." "Absolutely. Let me give you a personal tour," Richard said, leading him toward the vehicle. Naomi watched, the weight of vindication and fury settling deep in her chest. Her phone vibrated in her hand. It was Daniel. "You getting all this?" he asked. "Every second," she murmured. From his position nearby, Daniel had been recording the entire interaction. Richard's warm greeting, the instant offer to view the car, the seamless service. Michael played his part well, asking detailed questions, engaging as a serious buyer. Richard, eager to close a potential sale, showed no hesitation, no sign that this car was unavailable. It was all on camera. 20 minutes later, Michael walked out, giving Naomi a slight nod. "They couldn't have been more accommodating," he muttered under his breath as he passed. Naomi exhaled slowly. She now had undeniable proof. Proof that Richard and his team weren't just making arbitrary decisions, but deliberately filtering customers based on race. She pulled up the video Daniel had sent her, watching as Richard grinned while shaking Michael's hand. the very same man who had turned her away without a second thought. Naomi's lips curved into a knowing smile. The game was over. Now it was time to make her move. Naomi sat at her hotel desk, the city lights of Los Angeles glowing beyond the window. The video of Richard Langford personally showing the Bugatti Chiron Supersport to a white customer played on her laptop screen. She had watched it enough times to memorize every smug expression, every eager handshake. It wasn't just damning, it was irrefutable. But a direct attack wasn't the right move. Not yet. She wanted to see how they would react under pressure. Would they scramble? Cover their tracks? Would Richard panic and make mistakes? She needed to destabilize them first, push them off balance before making her final move. She picked up her phone and dialed Daniel. "Let's start with a little warning shot," she said. The email arrived in the corporate inbox of Caldwell Motors early the next morning. The sender was an unknown journalist from an independent business news outlet. At least that's what it appeared to be. The subject line was simple: inquiry regarding alleged discriminatory practices at Caldwell Motors, Beverly Hills. The message itself was precise, just enough to cause alarm without revealing too much. "Dear Caldwell Motors PR team, we have received multiple reports from sources regarding allegations of discriminatory customer service practices at your Beverly Hills showroom. Specifically, there are claims that customers are being evaluated based on race and appearance before being given access to certain vehicles. We have also been informed that there may be documented evidence supporting these claims. As we prepare our report, we are reaching out to provide your team with an opportunity to comment on these allegations. Please let us know if a spokesperson would be available for an interview." The email was signed with a fake journalist name, created by Daniel's contacts in the media world, enough to seem legitimate, but impossible to trace back to Naomi. Then they waited. At precisely 11:32 a.m., Richard Langford's personal phone rang. "Langford speaking," he answered, only to hear the sharp, impatient voice of his regional director on the other end. "Richard, what the hell is going on over there?" Richard's grip on the phone tightened. "Excuse me? We just got an email from a reporter asking for a statement on racial discrimination at your showroom." The voice on the other end was tense. "This better be a misunderstanding, because if we have a PR nightmare on our hands, I swear." Richard forced a chuckle. "I'm sure it's nonsense. You know how these reporters work. They love to stir up drama. I'll look into it, but I can assure you, we don't have any policies like that." His mind was already racing. Who the hell had leaked something like this? "Find out what's going on and clean it up," his boss snapped. "If this becomes a bigger issue, corporate will step in, and you don't want that." The line went dead. Richard stood in his office, fuming. Someone had talked. Someone had brought outside attention to the way things were run here. He stormed out of his office, marching straight onto the showroom floor. His eyes locked onto Maria Torres. Maria had just finished a routine meeting when Richard's voice cut through the air. "Maria, in my office. Now." Her stomach twisted. She followed him through the showroom, feeling every pair of eyes on her back as they walked past. The door shut behind them with a sharp click, sealing them inside his glass-walled office. Richard leaned against his desk, arms crossed, expression sharp and unreadable. "Tell me something," he said. "Have you been talking to anyone you shouldn't?" Maria's fingers curled slightly at her sides. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb with me," he snapped. "There's a journalist snooping around, asking about our policies. Someone in this showroom must have opened their mouth." Maria forced herself to stay calm, but her pulse pounded in her ears. "I haven't spoken to anyone," she said, voice steady. "I just do my job, like everyone else." Richard studied her. His gaze was sharp, calculating. "You've always been a little soft about this," he murmured. "I've noticed. You hesitate. You get too concerned about things that aren't your problem." Maria swallowed. Richard sighed, feigning disappointment. "Let me make this clear. If I find out that someone in this building is trying to stir up trouble, there will be consequences. Understand?" Maria nodded once. She couldn't afford to show fear. Richard stared at her for another few seconds, then waved a dismissive hand. "Get back to work." Maria walked out, her heart hammering. She needed to warn Naomi, but she also knew she was being watched now. Naomi sat in a quiet corner of a private lounge in her hotel, scrolling through her emails. She had been expecting Richard's next move, and sure enough, it didn't take long. An anonymous tip from an employee, someone inside the showroom, confirmed Richard was investigating his own staff. Naomi smiled to herself. Good. That meant he was nervous. It was time to take it further. She composed an email attaching the video evidence Daniel had captured of Richard's preferential treatment. The message was short, calculated. To Jonathan Fields, Caldwell Motors board member. Subject, urgent, customer treatment issue at Beverly Hills showroom. Jonathan, I thought you should see this. This is how our customers are being treated at one of our most high-profile locations. If this gets out, we're looking at more than just a bad headline. We're looking at a company-wide scandal. I suggest we discuss this before it becomes a public matter. She hit send. Now the real panic would begin. It took less than 24 hours. Richard was in the middle of reviewing sales reports when his phone rang again, this time from corporate headquarters. Langford, he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. The voice on the other end was clipped and cold. We have a problem. Richard sat up straighter. What kind of problem? A member of the board received a report that there may be discrepancies in customer treatment at your showroom. His breath caught. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean, the voice snapped. We have a video, Richard. And I've seen it. Explain to me why a white customer was immediately shown a high-end vehicle while another potential buyer, who I might add was just as financially qualified, was told there was nothing available. Richard felt his stomach drop. This is completely blown out of proportion, he tried, forcing a chuckle. If you knew how many time wasters we get in a day. Cut the crap, the voice interrupted. We're launching an internal review immediately. You need to get ahead of this before it turns into a PR disaster. A cold sweat broke out at the back of Richard's neck. Understood, he said stiffly. He ended the call, gripping the edge of his desk. Someone was playing a very dangerous game, and he had a sinking feeling he knew exactly who it was. Richard Langford sat in his office, gripping the edge of his desk, his mind racing. The phone call from corporate had rattled him. They had seen the video. Someone had sent it to the board, bypassing every layer of damage control he had built over the years. His stomach churned with frustration. He had built this showroom into one of the highest performing locations for Caldwell Motors. His methods had worked. His policies had kept the numbers strong. And now, because of some supposed investigation, everything he had built was at risk. He couldn't allow that. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. Get the management team in the conference room. Now! Within 15 minutes, every department head at the Beverly Hills showroom was seated around the long glass table, the air thick with tension. Richard paced at the head of the table, his expression controlled but boiling underneath. We have a situation, he began, his voice sharp. Someone inside this showroom is feeding information to outsiders, and I want to know who. The managers exchanged wary glances, but no one spoke. Richard continued. Effective immediately, all internal emails related to customer profiling, screening processes, or sales prioritization are to be deleted. If I find a single email that could be used against us, there will be consequences. Silence. And from now on, he added, leaning forward, we don't discuss anything outside of this building. No casual conversations, no jokes, nothing. A sales manager hesitated. Sir, do we know how much they... We know they have enough, Richard cut in, eyes narrowing. And if we don't get ahead of this, it's going to come down on all of us. His gaze swept the table. So I'll ask again. Who has been talking? No one answered. Richard exhaled, his patience wearing thin. Fine. If no one wants to confess, I'll find out myself. Maria sat stiffly at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through the company emails on her screen. She had deleted anything suspicious, just as Richard had ordered. But she knew it wouldn't matter. The damage was already done. Her phone buzzed beside her. Unknown number. Her throat tightened. She grabbed the phone and quickly stepped into the employee lounge before answering. Hello? Maria, it's me. Naomi's voice was calm, but Maria could hear the urgency beneath it. Richard is looking for someone to blame, Maria whispered. He's convinced there's a leak. I figured this would happen, Naomi said. Did he talk to you? Maria swallowed. Not yet, but I know it's coming. There was a pause. Listen to me, Naomi said finally. Stay calm. If he questions you, deny everything. Do not give him a reason to suspect you. Maria closed her eyes, trying to slow her breathing. I'm scared. I know, Naomi said, softer now. But I won't let anything happen to you. Maria nodded, even though Naomi couldn't see her. Then the worst thing happened. A shadow passed in front of the lounge doorway. Maria turned, and there he was, Richard Langford, watching her. Her heart stopped. I have to go, she whispered before hanging up. Richard stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Maria. His voice was smooth, but his eyes were cold. Mr. Langford, she said, forcing a polite smile. He studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the chairs. Have a seat. Maria hesitated, but she had no choice. She sat down, hands folded in her lap to hide the slight tremor in her fingers. Richard took the seat across from her, tilting his head. You know why I'm here? Maria kept her expression neutral. No, sir. His lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. That's interesting, he said, because I have reason to believe that someone in this showroom has been talking to people they shouldn't. Maria didn't blink. I wouldn't know anything about that. Richard leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You see, Maria, I've always thought you were different. You ask a lot of questions. You don't always follow the flow. She held his gaze. I just do my job. Richard nodded slowly. And that's what I like about you. He let the words settle, then added, So I'll ask again. Have you spoken to anyone? Maria gripped the hem of her blazer under the table. No. Richard's jaw twitched, but he leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Good. He stood, adjusting the cuffs of his sleeves. Because if I find out someone has been running their mouth to the wrong people, it won't end well for them. Maria didn't move. Richard lingered for a second longer, then walked out. As soon as the door closed, Maria let out a shaky breath. Naomi sat in her hotel room, tapping her fingers on the table as she processed Maria's call. Richard was getting desperate. He was hunting for a scapegoat. That meant one thing. He was feeling real pressure now. Naomi knew this was bigger than one man. Richard was powerful, but he wasn't acting alone. She pulled out her laptop and started digging. Within an hour, she found it, a connection. Richard Langford had ties to someone in corporate, a senior executive, someone who had quietly supported his policies for years. She didn't have full proof yet, but she had enough to know she wasn't just fighting a corrupt showroom. She was up against something bigger, and she wasn't backing down. Maria barely had time to collect herself before the inevitable happened. Maria, Richard's voice rang out across the showroom floor. In my office, now. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral as she set down the tablet she had been holding. She had been expecting this. Still, knowing it was coming didn't make it any easier. The walk to Richard's office felt longer than usual. The glass walls of the showroom made her feel exposed, like every pair of eyes was watching, waiting. As she stepped inside, Richard closed the door behind her, his usual smirk replaced with something more unreadable. Have a seat, he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. Maria hesitated for only a second before lowering herself into the leather seat. She folded her hands in her lap, keeping her posture calm, even though every nerve in her body was telling her to run. Richard leaned back, fingers steepled together. Maria, I've always thought you were one of the smart ones. She said nothing. That's why I wanted to have this conversation privately, just between us. His tone was almost sympathetic. Almost. I know there's been a lot of noise lately. A lot of, misunderstandings. Maria held her breath. Richard sighed, shaking his head as if he were genuinely disappointed. I think we both know that someone in this showroom has been running their mouth to the wrong people. And I don't want to believe that person is you. Maria's stomach twisted. You see, he continued, this showroom has a reputation to protect. We have a reputation to protect. And I don't think you'd want to throw away everything you've worked for just because someone convinced you they were on your side. She knew exactly what he was doing. He was offering her a way out, a way to betray Naomi, to confirm that someone had been speaking to the press. But she also knew better than to fall into that trap. So she played along. "I don't know what you mean," she said, tilting her head just slightly, like she was confused. Richard gave her a long look, then exhaled, as if he was being forced to explain something he really didn't want to. "Maria," he said softer now, "I can protect you. If you just tell me who's been stirring this up, I can make sure you keep your job. You won't have to worry about a thing." Maria's fingers clenched together beneath the desk. "I appreciate that, sir," she said carefully, "but I really don't know anything." The sympathy vanished from his face. Just like that, the act was over. Richard's jaw tightened. "That's disappointing." Maria swallowed. He sat forward, his tone no longer gentle. "Do you think you can fight the system, Maria?" She didn't answer. "You're just an employee," he continued. "A replaceable one at that. If I find out you've been involved in any of this, you won't just lose this job. You'll be blacklisted. No dealership, no luxury brand will ever hire you again. Do you understand?" Maria felt the weight of his words settle over her like a thick fog. "If there's anything you want to tell me," he said, leaning back, "now would be the time." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I don't have anything to say." Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fine," he said flatly. "You can go." Maria stood, her legs feeling heavier than before. As she turned toward the door, Richard's voice stopped her one last time. "But if I find out you lied to me, Maria..." He let the sentence hang. She didn't turn around. She just walked out. Maria didn't realize how fast she was walking until she reached the break room. She grabbed her phone with shaking fingers and dialed the one person she knew she could trust. Naomi picked up after the first ring. "Maria." "He knows," Maria whispered, pressing her back against the wall. "Or at least, he's pretty damn sure. He's trying to scare me into admitting something." "What did he say?" Naomi's voice was steady, but Maria could tell she was already processing, calculating the next move. "He told me if I talk, I'll never work in this industry again." A pause. "Are you okay?" Maria let out a short, humorless laugh. "Not really," Naomi exhaled. "Listen to me. He's bluffing. He doesn't know for sure. It's why he's trying to push you into confessing. But he's getting desperate, which means we're doing something right." Maria wiped a hand across her forehead. "So what now?" "Now?" Naomi's voice hardened. "Now, we turn up the heat." Naomi sat at the small desk in her hotel room, staring at her laptop screen. The pieces were coming together, but she needed to act before Richard could control the narrative. She clicked on a name in her contact list. A journalist. One who wouldn't just publish a story but amplify it. She drafted a message. "I have something for you. Proof. I'll send it under the right conditions. This isn't just about one man. It's bigger than that." She hit send. Then she made her second move. Naomi picked up the phone and dialed an executive contact at Caldwell Motors, someone with enough authority to force a meeting with the board. When the voice on the other end picked up, she didn't waste time. "We need to talk. Before this turns into a crisis you can't control." Richard paced in his office, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Who sent the damn video?" he snapped. The voice on the other end, his ally in corporate, sighed. "We don't know yet, but the board is already talking. And Naomi Caldwell just requested a meeting." Richard stopped pacing. "She what?" "She's coming after you, Richard. And this time, she's not alone." For the first time since this all started, Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had underestimated Naomi Caldwell. That was a mistake. Naomi sat in the sleek conference room on the top floor of Caldwell Motors headquarters in Manhattan. The vast city skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but she wasn't here to admire the view. She was here to dismantle a system that had been allowed to fester within her company. She had sent the meeting request the night before, an urgent mandatory assembly for all senior executives and board members. She had been deliberately vague in the email, but she knew the right people would understand the gravity of her tone. This wasn't a routine discussion about quarterly earnings. This was a reckoning. The room was filled with some of the most powerful figures in the company. Men and women who controlled everything from marketing to brand development to customer relations. Among them, sitting across the long conference table, with an expression of forced confidence, was Richard Langford. Naomi studied him for a moment. He looked composed, but she could see the tension in the way he clenched his jaw, the way his fingers tapped idly on the polished wooden table. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know how bad it was going to be. She adjusted the microphone in front of her and cleared her throat. The murmurs died down instantly. "Thank you all for being here on such short notice," Naomi began, her voice smooth, controlled. "I called this meeting because we have a problem, a serious one." She let the weight of her words settle before continuing. "As you all know, Caldwell Motors has built its reputation on excellence, not just in craftsmanship, but in service, in prestige, in the way we treat our customers. We promise an experience that is welcoming to all who can afford our brand, regardless of background." She let her eyes scan the room. "But I recently discovered that this is not the reality at one of our most high-profile showrooms." A few executives exchanged glances, uncertain of where this was going. Others remained still, their expressions unreadable. Naomi turned toward the IT specialist seated at the side of the room. "Play the footage." The room darkened as the screen at the front of the conference room flickered to life. The video began. Naomi watched as her own rejection played out before the board, her being dismissed without a second thought. The clip transitioned to Michael Reeves, a white man, being welcomed and offered a viewing of the exact same car. She didn't react as the footage ran, but she didn't have to. The silence in the room spoke for itself. When the video ended, Naomi leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Well?" she asked, a heavy pause. Then Richard cleared his throat. This is an unfortunate misunderstanding." Naomi arched an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding?" Richard nodded, shifting in his chair. "Our showroom follows a specific customer service model. We prioritize potential buyers based on multiple factors, including purchasing history, interest level, and yes, sometimes appearance. It's not about exclusion, it's about efficiency." A few board members nodded slightly, but others looked uneasy. Naomi tilted her head. "So you're saying the policy is to turn away customers who don't look like buyers?" Richard forced a chuckle. "That's not what I said." "That's exactly what you said," Naomi countered, her voice sharp. "Tell me, Richard, would you have treated me the same way if I had walked in wearing a designer suit?" Richard hesitated for just a fraction of a second. It was enough. Naomi turned to the board. "This isn't a minor problem. This isn't just one showroom manager making poor decisions. This is systemic." She tapped the table. "And if we allow this to continue, we won't just be facing internal criticism. We'll be facing public outrage." An older man at the end of the table, Jonathan Fields, a longtime board member, cleared his throat. "Naomi, I understand your concerns. Truly. But let's not be naive about this. Luxury brands have always catered to a certain clientele. Our customers expect exclusivity." Naomi met his gaze. "Are you saying exclusivity and discrimination are the same thing?" Jonathan hesitated. "I'm saying there's a level of discretion involved in ensuring that our product remains aspirational." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Naomi could feel the divide forming, those who understood the risk and those who were too comfortable with the way things had always been. She turned her attention back to Richard. "Let me ask you something, Richard. If a wealthy black celebrity had walked into your showroom, would they have been treated the same way I was?" Richard let out a dry chuckle. "Of course not, because—" He stopped himself. Naomi smirked. "Because they're famous?" Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. She leaned forward. "You've just admitted that your team evaluates customers based on status rather than financial capability, which means our prestigious brand is built on the idea that only certain kinds of people should be allowed to access it." A younger executive near the middle of the table, Claire Danvers from Public Relations, spoke up. "If this gets out, we'll be accused of racial bias." Naomi turned to her. "There's no if, Claire. It's already happening. The only question is whether we address it internally or wait for the media to do it for us." The tension in the room thickened. Richard straightened his tie, forcing confidence into his voice. "This is being blown out of proportion. If you put every high-end dealership under a microscope, you'd find the same thing." That's how luxury markets operate. Naomi's eyes locked onto his. Not anymore. Silence. She exhaled. I have prepared a full report detailing the discriminatory practices that I've uncovered. If this company refuses to take action, I will make the report public. Richard's face paled slightly. Jonathan Fields frowned. That's a dangerous move, Naomi. You could damage the company's image beyond repair. Naomi held his gaze. Our brand image is already damaged. The only question is whether we control the fallout or let it consume us. She stood. I expect a decision from the board within 48 hours. Either we reform our policies, or I take this to the press. With that, she gathered her notes, turned, and walked toward the exit. As she reached the door, she glanced back once. Richard was staring at her, jaw tight, fingers curled against the table. She could see the rage simmering beneath his carefully controlled expression. He wasn't done fighting, but neither was she. Richard Langford sat in the dimly lit private lounge of an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, swirling a glass of bourbon in his hand. The conversation around the table was hushed, but the tension was unmistakable. Seated with him were 4 members of Caldwell Motors' board, executives with deep influence in the company's policies. He leaned forward, keeping his voice low. We have a problem, he said, placing his glass down. Naomi Caldwell is trying to dismantle everything we built. If we don't act now, we'll be at the mercy of her so-called reforms. Jonathan Fields, one of the senior board members, frowned. Richard, you have to understand, Naomi isn't just another executive. She owns a significant stake in this company. If she takes this public, we could be dealing with an unprecedented scandal. Richard forced a calm chuckle. Scandal? Only if she controls the narrative. He leaned back. We don't have to let that happen. Claire Danvers, the head of PR, looked wary. You're suggesting we go after her? Richard smiled. I'm suggesting we remind everyone why Naomi Caldwell is a liability. The men around the table exchanged glances. We all know she's been stepping on toes since she took over. Richard continued smoothly. She's aggressive, she's controlling, and now she's threatening the company's very foundation. Investors don't like uncertainty. If we make them doubt her, she won't have the power to push this forward. Jonathan exhaled sharply. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Richard's smile widened. We start a whisper campaign. Let the press think there's a corporate power struggle. Leak some carefully placed information about how Naomi is using this scandal to consolidate control. Make it look like she's forcing out key players to gain more influence. Claire hesitated. If this gets traced back to us? It won't, Richard interrupted. All we need to do is nudge the right journalists. Let them connect the dots however they like. Jonathan sighed, rubbing his temple. I don't like it. Richard shrugged. Then don't get involved. But when Naomi comes after this company's reputation, don't say I didn't warn you. A long silence stretched across the table. Finally, Jonathan muttered, Let's see where this goes. By the next morning, whispers had already begun to spread. The first article appeared in a lesser-known business blog, subtly implying corporate unrest within Caldwell Motors. It cited anonymous sources who claimed that Naomi Caldwell was orchestrating a power grab, using the discrimination scandal as leverage to force out certain board members and expand her own control. Within hours, a second article surfaced, this one from a larger outlet. It questioned Naomi's leadership and whether her approach was too aggressive for a company known for its exclusivity. Then came the investor calls. Naomi's phone buzzed constantly as concerned stakeholders reached out. Some were supportive, but others were hesitant, unsure. The board hadn't made a public statement yet, and without clarity, uncertainty was starting to shake investor confidence. She stood in her office reading through one of the articles on her tablet when Daniel walked in, his expression tight. You've seen this? He asked. Naomi nodded. Richard's moving faster than I expected. Daniel shut the door behind him. They're trying to control the narrative before you can. If enough people believe this is a power struggle, it'll dilute the real issue. She exhaled. And if that happens, the board will have an excuse to stall any action against Richard. They'll claim it's internal politics and refuse to take sides. Daniel folded his arms. They're trying to make you look like the problem instead of the solution. Naomi set the tablet down, which means I need to change the game. Daniel's eyes narrowed. How? Naomi picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She needed someone who could take this story to the next level. Someone the public would trust. She tapped a number and hit call. The line rang twice before a voice answered. "This is Lisa Monroe." Lisa Monroe, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. Naomi didn't waste time. "Lisa, it's Naomi Caldwell. I have a story for you." A pause, then the journalist's voice sharpened. "I'm listening." Meanwhile, in the boardroom at Caldwell Motors headquarters, another conversation was unfolding. Jonathan Fields had just ended a call with a major investor when he turned to one of his fellow board members, an older man with silver hair and a weary expression. "She's losing support," Jonathan muttered. "The investors are getting nervous." The man nodded. "But Naomi's smart. She won't back down easily." Jonathan exhaled. "Then we need to make sure she doesn't have the chance to escalate this." That afternoon, Naomi received an email that made her blood run cold. It was from a board member she had trusted, one of the few she thought was on her side. Subject: Board Decision. "Naomi, I regret to inform you that the board has decided not to move forward with the policy changes you proposed. After careful deliberation, we believe that further discussion is needed before taking any formal action. We understand your concerns, but we urge you to consider the long-term impact of taking this public. We hope you will continue to work with the board to find a more balanced solution. Best, Jonathan Fields." Naomi stared at the screen, feeling a slow burn of betrayal and fury. They weren't going to act. They were going to bury this. Richard had done exactly what he set out to do: turn the board against her, isolate her, make her seem like the real problem. She gritted her teeth. They wanted her to back down. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She grabbed her phone, called Daniel. "When's the soonest I can get a press conference?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Tomorrow morning." "Book it." Naomi was done waiting. If the board wouldn't act, then she would take this fight to the public. And this time, Richard wouldn't be able to control the story. The conference room at Caldwell Motors headquarters was buzzing with anticipation. The press had arrived early, setting up cameras, adjusting microphones, preparing for what was already being called a landmark moment in corporate accountability. Naomi sat in a quiet room adjacent to the main event, taking a deep breath as she reviewed her notes. She had spent years carefully navigating corporate politics, handling boardroom negotiations with precision. But today wasn't about corporate games. Today was about the truth. Daniel stood nearby, his phone in hand, monitoring the incoming coverage. "CNN is already running a segment about the allegations," he said. "The Wall Street Journal just posted an article questioning Caldwell Motors' leadership, and Lisa Monroe's piece is trending on Twitter." Naomi nodded. "Good." Daniel gave her a concerned look. "Are you ready for this?" Naomi exhaled. "I've been ready for this my whole life." She straightened her blazer, smoothed her hair, and walked out to face the world. The moment Naomi stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in flashes of cameras. Dozens of reporters from major networks and publications filled the seats, laptops open, microphones extended, ready to catch every word. She approached the podium with quiet confidence, scanning the audience before speaking. "Good afternoon," she began. "I want to thank you all for being here today. I wish I could say this was just another routine press event, but the reality is far more serious." The room fell silent, hanging on to her every word. For decades, Caldwell Motors has been a leader in the luxury automotive industry, built on the promise of prestige and excellence. But recently, I have uncovered something deeply troubling: a system of discrimination embedded in our sales practices. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. She continued, her voice steady. "I recently visited one of our most prominent showrooms, not as a CEO, but as a customer. What I experienced firsthand was a clear racial bias in how customers are treated." She gestured toward the screen behind her. The video began to play. The room watched as Naomi was dismissed at the showroom, followed immediately by a white customer receiving first-class treatment. More murmurs, some gasps, pens scratching against notepads. She turned back to the audience. "This is not just an isolated incident. It is a pattern. It is a culture, and it is unacceptable." The room exploded with questions. "Ms. Caldwell, are you saying that Caldwell Motors actively discriminates against minority customers?" Do you believe this is a company-wide issue? What steps are you taking to address this? Naomi held up a hand, commanding the room's attention once more. This is not just about Caldwell Motors. This is about the entire luxury auto industry. It is about the barriers placed before customers of color, even when they have the money to spend. I refuse to allow this company to be part of that culture. She let her words settle before delivering the final blow. I have brought this issue to the board. I have demanded policy changes, and I will not stop until we see accountability at every level, including the removal of those who have allowed this to continue. With that, she stepped back. The press went wild. By that evening, the headlines were everywhere. Naomi Caldwell exposes racial bias at Caldwell Motors, calls for industry reform. CNN luxury car industry faces reckoning after explosive press conference. The New York Times. CEO Naomi Caldwell takes stand against discrimination in high-end sales. Forbes. The video from the press conference had gone viral, trending worldwide within hours. Customers began sharing their own experiences of racial discrimination at luxury dealerships. Twitter threads detailing past incidents flooded the platform. Then came the backlash against Caldwell Motors. Celebrity influencers called for boycotts. Civil rights organizations demanded action. Even customers who had never faced discrimination began questioning whether they wanted to support a brand associated with bias. The pressure was immense, and Richard Langford knew it. Richard sat in his office watching the press conference on his tablet. His fingers gripped the edges of his desk as he listened to Naomi's speech. The video had been broadcasted on every major network. There was no containing it. His phone rang. He snatched it up. "What?" It was Jonathan Fields. "Richard, we need to talk." Richard exhaled sharply. "I know what you're going to say." "You don't," Jonathan cut in. "The board is calling an emergency meeting. The investors are panicking. This is spiraling out of control." Richard stood abruptly, knocking over a glass of whiskey. "You can't be serious. You're actually considering firing me over this?" Jonathan's voice was tight. "Richard, you've become a liability." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "We'll talk tomorrow," Jonathan said. Then the line went dead. Richard stood there staring at his phone. This couldn't be happening. He had spent years building his empire, controlling the system. And now Naomi Caldwell was tearing it down. But he wasn't finished. The headlines had barely settled when Richard Langford decided he wasn't going down without a fight. The press conference had blindsided him, leaving him cornered and publicly vilified. The board was turning against him, investors were growing wary, and worst of all, Naomi Caldwell had outmaneuvered him. He wasn't going to let that stand. He leaned back in his leather chair, gripping his whiskey glass as he listened to the voice on the other end of the call. "You need to hit her hard," the man advised, his tone low and confident. "We'll plant the narrative. All you need to do is sit back and let it spread." Richard smirked. "How fast can you get it done?" "Consider it already started." He ended the call and turned his gaze toward the city skyline. Naomi thought she had won, but he still had cards to play. He was about to turn public opinion against her. By the next morning, whispers had turned into full-blown speculation. The first article appeared on a fringe business site, suggesting that Naomi Caldwell's true motive wasn't justice but power. Is Naomi Caldwell exploiting a corporate scandal to consolidate control? The piece painted her as a woman hungry for influence, someone using social justice rhetoric as a means to seize authority over the company. Then came the anonymous op-eds. The hypocrisy of a CEO who profits from racial outrage. A hit piece implied that Naomi had never cared about discrimination before and was only leveraging the issue now because it benefited her. Social media accounts, many of them bots, began flooding Twitter and Facebook with conspiracy theories. She's just another elite using race to manipulate the system. What if she planned this whole scandal to gain control of the company? Notice how she suddenly cares about this after she was rejected at the dealership? She's mad she wasn't recognized. The attacks were relentless. Naomi sat in her office, scrolling through the articles and tweets. She had expected resistance, but this was a full-scale assault. Her phone rang. Daniel's voice came through, tense. "It's worse than we thought. They've got bots flooding the internet, and I just got word that some investors are starting to second-guess their support." Naomi pinched the bridge of her nose. They're trying to muddy the waters. If they make me the story, people will forget about the actual issue, Daniel sighed. And it's working. Even some of the news outlets that were on our side are now reporting on the power struggle instead of the discrimination. Naomi exhaled sharply. We need to take back the narrative, but we need something big. Then before she could say another word, her assistant walked in, eyes wide. You need to see this. Naomi took the tablet and her breath caught. A new article had just been published. Former showroom employee confirms racial bias at Caldwell Motors, provides internal emails as proof. The byline read, Lisa Monroe. Naomi's eyes darted to the first paragraph. Maria Torres, a former employee at Caldwell Motors' Beverly Hills showroom, has come forward with first-hand accounts of racial discrimination within the company. Torres, who resigned earlier this year, provided leaked emails that appear to confirm a pattern of excluding minority customers from high-end sales opportunities. Naomi's heart pounded. Maria had gone public. Meanwhile, across the city, Richard's phone was blowing up. Langford speaking, he barked. You're finished, came the voice on the other end. It was Jonathan Fields. Richard clenched his jaw. What the hell are you talking about? Maria Torres just exposed you, Richard. Emails, internal memos, everything. Richard's blood ran cold. Board meeting is at 6, Jonathan continued. We're voting, and you already know which way it's going. The line went dead. For the first time, Richard felt real fear. Naomi sat in the back of a car, the city lights flashing past as she read the article again. Maria had done it. She had taken the risk, despite everything. Daniel, sitting beside her, exhaled. This changes everything. Naomi nodded. Yes, it does. But was it enough? Tomorrow the board would vote, and Richard wasn't the type to surrender quietly. The boardroom at Caldwell Motors headquarters in New York was eerily silent as the most critical meeting in the company's history began. The room was filled with tension, the kind that made the air feel heavier, almost suffocating. Seated at the long, polished table were the 15 most powerful people in the company, board members, major investors, and top executives. A decision was about to be made, one that would determine whether the company could salvage its reputation or spiral further into controversy. Naomi Caldwell sat at one end of the table, poised, collected. Across from her, Richard Langford sat rigidly, his expression controlled, but his eyes dark with rage. He knew what this meeting was about, and he knew what was at stake. Jonathan Fields, one of the senior board members, cleared his throat. We all know why we're here, he began. The events of the past few weeks have put this company in a difficult position. The question before us today is simple. Does Richard Langford's continued employment serve the best interests of Caldwell Motors? The room remained silent. Then another board member spoke. Before we proceed with a vote, I believe Mr. Langford should have a chance to speak. Naomi expected this. Richard wasn't going to go down without trying to spin the situation one last time. Richard stood, adjusting his tie before stepping forward. He exhaled sharply, then turned to the board, his voice smooth but tinged with urgency. I understand that this situation has caused a great deal of concern, he began, but I urge you all to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. He placed both hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. We are in the business of selling exclusivity, prestige. A luxury brand is only as strong as its image. And what has happened in the last few weeks? Our reputation has been dragged through the mud. Sales have declined. Our customers are walking away. He turned to Naomi. And why? Because Naomi Caldwell decided to weaponize an isolated incident to push her own agenda. Naomi didn't flinch, but she could feel some members of the board shifting uncomfortably. Richard pressed forward. Let's be honest. What are we really dealing with here? A single showroom manager making a bad call? A handful of customer complaints? And yet, we've allowed this to turn into a full-blown media crisis. He straightened, his voice tightening. Naomi has forced this company into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. She has made us look weak. And now our stock is falling. Our investors are worried. And we are at risk of losing our position in the market. A murmur rippled through the boardroom. Richard had struck a nerve. Some of the older board members had always been wary of Naomi's direct approach. And now Richard was playing into their fears. The fear of change. The fear of losing control. He turned to them now, making his final push. If you remove me, you send a message that this company will bend to public pressure, that we will abandon those who have built it the moment things get difficult. If you keep me, we can course correct. We can show strength. We can control the narrative. But if you choose to side with her, he gestured toward Naomi, then you risk turning this company into something it was never meant to be. He sat down, his face unreadable, but Naomi knew he thought he had won. She let the room sit in silence for a beat before standing. Her voice when she spoke was steady, measured. Let me be clear, she said. This is not about public pressure. It's about integrity. She turned to the board, meeting each member's eyes as she spoke. Caldwell Motors prides itself on being an industry leader. But what does leadership mean? Does it mean turning a blind eye when something is broken? Does it mean allowing discrimination to exist within our own doors? She took a slow breath. I came to you all weeks ago with proof of what was happening in our showrooms. You chose to ignore it, but the truth didn't go away just because it was inconvenient, and now the world has seen it. She turned and gestured to Daniel, who stood at the back of the room. He pressed a button on the projector, and a new set of evidence appeared on the screen. Emails, internal memos, customer complaints that had been dismissed. And then, the final piece, an official statement from David Williams, the Black entrepreneur who had been turned away at the Beverly Hills showroom. His letter was blunt and powerful. I have spent my life building success only to be treated like I did not belong. Caldwell Motors had a chance to correct this mistake. Instead, they protected those who made it. If the company refuses to change, I will take my business and my influence elsewhere. Silence. Naomi turned back to the board. If we allow this to continue, we will lose more than just money. We will lose credibility. We will lose trust. And once that is gone, it doesn't come back. She let her words settle before delivering the final blow. So ask yourselves, is Richard Langford the man you want representing this company? The weight of her question hung in the air. Jonathan Fields cleared his throat. We will now proceed to a vote. The boardroom doors were closed. The votes were cast. And then the decision was made. Richard sat stiffly in his chair, his jaw clenched. Jonathan Fields stood, adjusting his glasses. The results of the vote are as follows. He paused, then 11 votes in favor of termination, 4 against. A cold chill settled over Richard. Jonathan continued, his voice calm but firm. Richard Langford, as of this moment, you are officially removed from your position at Caldwell Motors. A stunned silence followed, then whispers, a shuffle of papers, the sound of security stepping forward. Richard's face twisted in disbelief. You can't do this. Jonathan didn't flinch. It's already done. Security placed a firm hand on Richard's shoulder. Sir, you need to leave. Richard's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. There were none left. He stood slowly, straightening his suit jacket, trying to salvage his dignity. But everyone was already looking away, moving on. As he was escorted out of the boardroom, Naomi didn't watch him go. She had bigger things to focus on. Richard Langford had spent years carefully crafting his power, ensuring that no one could touch him. But as he sat alone in his penthouse apartment, staring blankly at the news ticker running across the television screen, he realized that everything he had built was gone. Former showroom director fired for discriminatory practices, and industry reckoning begins. Disgraced executive Richard Langford, ousted from Caldwell Motors amid scandal. From power to exile, the man who lost everything overnight. Every major news outlet was running the same story, the same humiliating truth. His phone, once constantly ringing with industry connections and job offers, had gone silent. He had called a few high-level contacts in the luxury automotive world, but they had all brushed him off. No one wanted to be associated with him. No one would hire him. He had been declared radioactive. He clenched his jaw as he scrolled through the internet, his name now permanently tarnished. Customers were boycotting showrooms that had been linked to him. Former employees were coming forward, confirming that the toxic culture at his showroom had been real all along. He reached for his whiskey glass, but his hands were shaking. This wasn't supposed to happen. Naomi wasn't supposed to win, but she had. and there was nothing he could do about it. Naomi Caldwell stood before a packed conference room at Caldwell Motors headquarters, facing dozens of reporters, employees, and investors. But this wasn't a press conference about a scandal. This was about what came next. She placed her hands on the podium, looking out at the cameras. "Today," she began, "we turn the page." A hush fell over the room. "The past few weeks have revealed serious flaws in our company. It is clear that there have been deeply ingrained biases in how we have served our customers, and for that, we take full responsibility." She let her words sink in before continuing. "But accountability is not enough. Real change must happen. Starting today, Caldwell Motors is initiating a company-wide restructuring of our customer service model. Our goals are simple: equity, respect, and excellence." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. She turned toward the large screen behind her. It lit up with a list of changes. A new mandatory training program for all employees, focused on eliminating bias in customer interactions. A zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior at all levels of the company. A dedicated oversight team to investigate any reports of unfair treatment. New leadership at key showroom locations to ensure policies are enforced. She turned back to the audience. "We are not just changing policies. We are changing our culture." The room was silent, listening. "This is about more than just Caldwell Motors," she continued. "This is about the entire luxury auto industry. It is about ensuring that every customer, regardless of background, race, or appearance, is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." Then she delivered the final blow. "We are setting a new standard, and we challenge every other luxury brand in this industry to do the same." The room erupted in applause. Naomi had just changed the game. After the press conference, Naomi made her way back to her office, where Maria Torres was waiting. The young woman stood nervously, still adjusting to the attention she had received since blowing the whistle on Richard. Naomi gave her a warm smile. "You did something brave," Naomi said, "and I know that wasn't easy." Maria exhaled, nodding. I couldn't stay silent anymore." Naomi studied her for a moment. "We need people like you, people who aren't afraid to speak up when something is wrong." Maria's eyes widened slightly. "I'd like to offer you a new position," Naomi continued. "I want you to help oversee the new training and reform initiatives. Help us rebuild. Make sure this never happens again." Maria's breath caught. "Are you serious?" Naomi nodded. For a long moment, Maria just stood there stunned. Then she straightened her posture and nodded. "I won't let you down," she said. Naomi smiled. "I know you won't." As the days passed, the impact of Naomi's victory reached far beyond Caldwell Motors. Luxury brands across the industry were now under pressure to reevaluate their own customer policies. Other CEOs were making statements, promising internal reviews of their showroom practices. Customers who had been silenced for years began coming forward with their own stories of discrimination in high-end dealerships. The industry was changing because Naomi had forced it to. That evening, Naomi stood in her office, looking out over the New York skyline. She had won the battle, but she knew the fight wasn't over. Discrimination in business didn't disappear overnight. There were always people like Richard Langford, people who would fight to maintain exclusion and control. But Naomi had proven something. She had shown the world that change was possible, and she wasn't stopping here. A small smile touched her lips. This was only the beginning. The Caldwell Motors showroom in Beverly Hills looked almost unrecognizable compared to a few months ago. The cold, unwelcoming atmosphere had been replaced by something different, a sense of inclusivity, a new energy that hadn't been there before. New employees had been brought in, and the staff who remained had undergone mandatory training to ensure equal treatment for all customers. A new general manager, David Holloway, had been appointed, someone Naomi had personally vetted, a man with a track record of advocating for diversity and fairness in high-end retail. The showroom, once the epicenter of controversy, was now a symbol of transformation. Customers had started noticing the difference. "It actually feels like they want me here," one black customer was heard saying as he test drove a Bentley. "Last time I was here, I felt invisible. Now, they're actually listening to what I want," another customer mentioned to a sales associate. The numbers didn't lie either. The sales dip that had occurred during the scandal was reversing. The press coverage had initially made Caldwell Motors a cautionary tale. But now, It was a case study in how a company could right its wrongs. Not everyone was happy about it. Maria Torres adjusted her new employee badge as she walked through the halls of the corporate office. The title below her name read, Employee Training and Compliance Supervisor. A few months ago, she had been terrified to speak out. Now she was leading the very changes she once thought were impossible. She entered Naomi's office, her hands clutching a stack of reports on the effectiveness of the new training programs. First wave of employee evaluations came in, she said, setting the documents on Naomi's desk. So far, compliance is at 87%. Some resistance, but overall, it's working. Naomi smiled. Good, and how are you feeling about all of this? Maria hesitated, then exhaled. It's overwhelming, but in a good way. Naomi nodded. You're doing something that matters. Maria sat down, glancing at the city skyline through the office window. I never thought I'd be part of something like this. I used to think the system was too big to fight, that it was easier to just keep your head down. Naomi folded her hands. Change doesn't come from the people who stay silent. It comes from the ones who decide enough is enough. Maria's expression softened. Thank you, she said quietly. Naomi shook her head. Thank you, because this wasn't just about fixing a company, it was about fixing a mindset. That evening, Naomi stood by the window of her office, her arms crossed as she gazed over New York City. She had won this battle. But the fight for equity in business wasn't a one-time event. It was an ongoing war. She knew there would be other Richard Langfords, other boardroom fights, other systems reluctant to change, and she was ready for them. A small smile touched her lips. This was just the beginning. Naomi Caldwell's story is more than just a corporate battle. It's a reminder that real change requires courage. She could have walked away, but instead, she chose to challenge the system, expose the truth, and demand accountability. Because sometimes the biggest victories don't happen in courtrooms or boardrooms. They happen when people refuse to accept injustice as just the way things are. So what do you think? Would you have fought the same way Naomi did? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this, because the fight for fairness is far from over.